Tonight, deadly standoff in Minnesota.
I need an ambulance.
2 police officers and a paramedic shot and killed in the line of duty responding to a family in danger.
I'm Jonah Kaplan in Burnsville, Minnesota. What we've learned about a horrific shooting.
The suspect also dead tonight. We'll have the latest. Also tonight, new bloodshed in Gaza and protests in Israel.
I'm Holly Williams in Tel Aviv, where Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is coming under pressure from both outside and inside the country.
Tributes and arrests as Russians remember a fierce critic of the Kremlin. The U.S. ambassador today standing in solidarity. Plus, presidential pitches. Donald Trump's message in Michigan this weekend.
Bring our country back from hell.
Nikki Haley insists she's in it to win it.
You can't win an election if you're spending more time in court than you are on the campaign trail.
Weather threats. In Florida, the Daytona 500 idled. Millions of Californians facing a fire hose of rain again. The latest forecast. And later, serving up second chances, from knife skills to free meals. How this San Francisco nonprofit is uplifting disadvantaged trainees in the kitchen and beyond.
I get to do what I love for a passion, but I'm also helping people.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Tonight, flags in Minnesota have been lowered to half-staff honoring 2 police officers and a paramedic shot and killed today. It happened after an hours-long standoff with a gunman in the Minneapolis suburb of Burnsville after a domestic abuse call. Another officer was wounded. Governor Tim Walz called it, quote, horrific, adding, we must never take for granted the bravery and sacrifices of our police and first responders. Tonight, a solemn procession as the bodies of the slain officers and paramedic were moved from a Minneapolis hospital in preparation for their funerals. Jonah Kaplan of our Minneapolis station WCCO joins us now with the very latest. Jonah, good evening to you.
Jerika, good evening. It's now been almost 12 hours that officers are here in this neighborhood. You see behind me still a very active scene. Investigators, detectives looking for answers about what led up to this shooting.
I need an ambulance to stand by on the address, and I need 2 additional ambulances.
The call for paramedics came shortly after 5 this morning. Minutes later, dispatch ordered everyone to stay back.
Medics, please back off. Medics, back off and turn off lights.
First responders rushed to the home in Burnsville, a suburb about 20 minutes outside Minneapolis.
They were very tense.
They say an armed man was barricaded inside along with his family. As police arrived, the man opened fire. Video shows at least 1 SWAT vehicle with its windshield nearly shattered by bullets.
Several officers did return fire. I will note that this individual had several guns and large amounts of ammunition.
2 27-year-old officers from the Burnsville Police Department were struck and killed. A paramedic who rushed to the aid of one of them also died in the shootout.
They know they have to give up their life sometime, and they do it anyways.
State investigators confirmed the suspect died in the confrontation with police. However, family members in the home made it out safely.
7 children inside of the home from ages 15 to 2. It's a very troubling situation, and we're glad they aren't hurt as part of this.
And again, a 3rd officer struck by gunfire. He was rushed to the hospital, but the good news tonight, he's expected to make a full recovery. Jerika?
That is good news. Jonah Kaplan, thank you. Well, tomorrow, the UN's top court holds historic hearings into the legality of Israel's 57-year occupation of the West Bank, land sought for a Palestinian state. Today in Gaza, there was new bloodshed and misery. CBS's Holly Williams is in Tel Aviv and has more. A warning, some of the images are graphic.
At Al-Aqsa Hospital, the race to save lives never stops. In Gaza, the bloodshed knows no age limits. Israel has vowed to press ahead with a ground offensive in the city of Rafah, where around 1.5 million Palestinians are now living. Most of them displaced and exhausted, many of them hungry. This young girl says she came to Rafah after Israeli tanks fired on a school where she was sheltering. Israel says it'll allow civilians to leave the battle zone, but the US is warning against an assault without a credible plan to protect civilians.
And now they're packed into Rafah, exposed and vulnerable. They need to be protected.
The US is also pushing for a ceasefire, though negotiations seem to be stuck, with Israel calling Hamas's demands delusional. And while the US is still hoping for a two-state solution, finally giving Palestinians their own state in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said today that his country, quote, rejects international dictates regarding an accord with the Palestinians. Some of Israel's allies, including the US, appear to be growing frustrated with its intransigence. And domestically, Prime Minister Netanyahu is under intense pressure. Last night in Israel, what looked like the biggest anti-government protests since the war began, calling for Netanyahu to resign. Many here are angry at security failures on October 7th and his handling of the war. If Israel does go ahead with an offensive in Rafah, despite mounting international criticism, it's these people who'll suffer, including children who've already lost their innocence. I've seen a father hold his daughter's hand while her body was cut to pieces, says this 15-year-old girl. I've seen a woman killed by a sniper. In this war, we've seen things that nobody could imagine.
The World Health Organization says that Nasser Hospital, the biggest medical facility in southern Gaza, is no longer functioning after it was raided by Israeli special forces this past week. But Eureka, Israel's military, says it's doing everything it can to make sure the hospital stays operational.
Holly Williams, thank you for your reporting in Tel Aviv. To Russia now, where more than 400 people have been detained while paying tribute to Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Memorials have appeared in several cities. The 47-year-old died in custody on Friday. This is U.S. Ambassador Lynn Tracy in Moscow. And today, Navalny's wife shared this picture on Instagram, her first social media post since her husband's death. The caption simply read, "I love you." And shifting to politics here in the United States, this weekend, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley hit the campaign trail with South Carolina's Republican primary now less than a week away. CBS's Skylar Henry reports from the White House with more on what we can expect in the coming days. Skylar.
Hey, Jerika, good evening to you. As we inch closer to the South Carolina primary, both of the Republican candidates left in the race are sharpening their verbal attacks. On one hand, critical of the current state of international and domestic matters. On the other hand, of each other and the roadblocks in their way.
He's going to spend more time in a courtroom than on the campaign trail. We can't win like that.
Former Ambassador Nikki Haley is making her final push in the Palmetto State, jabbing at the slew of legal challenges facing former President Donald Trump. She's looking to close the gap and sway voters as the former president leads in the polls in South Carolina.
We need a new generational leader that's not distracted by court cases, that's not filled with vengeance towards our enemies, that's not in the drama.
I will fight crooked Joe Biden's weaponized persecution at every step, and we will win. We're going to win.
The former president lashed out about his legal woes at a rally in Michigan on Saturday, 10 days before that state's GOP primary, and on the heels of a New York civil trial ruling ordering him to pay more than $350 million in penalties. Support for Trump remains strong.
I think it's absolutely ludicrous. I think some of it is politically motivated.
They're not talking about legal challenges. They're talking about their challenges across a kitchen table.
Though critics are slamming his silence over the recent death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny and comments on NATO, suggesting the U.S. shouldn't protect allies who fail to meet their defense spending targets.
Skylar, switching gears a little bit, President Biden said Saturday that he's optimistic that Congress will renew aid for Ukraine. But the question really is how, and what does that look like?
Yeah, House Republicans didn't have much of an appetite for the bipartisan Senate plan that would have included aid for Ukraine, Jerika. There is some momentum behind a House-led proposal that includes what amounts to $57 billion for both Ukraine and Israel, but also stricter measures at the U.S.-Mexico border. But despite that urgency, Jerika, the House is out on recess and won't be back until February 28th.
And I've said this before, we wait and see what happens. Skylar Henry, thank you. Now to weather threats on both coasts. In Florida, rain idled today's Daytona 500. The race now moved to Monday. And California is set to get soaked again. More than 37 million people tonight under flood watch. Meteorologist Paul Goodlow with our partners at the Weather Channel is tracking it all. Hey, Paul.
Jerika, rain, flooding, even more snow is a big story out towards the west, and also severe weather, including the risk of tornadoes tomorrow in the Central Valley here and the Gold Country, the foothills of the Sierra. Strong and severe thunderstorms are possible. Rain and snow already in there right now. We'll get this heavier as we head throughout the afternoon and the evening, but it's the afternoon times we could see perhaps enough sunshine before that to give us thunderstorms here. But then later tomorrow, the instability decreases, but the moisture does not stop. From Southern California to Northern California, all the mountains across the Rockies picking up feet upon feet of snow. The big concern, though, is more rain and more flooding expected with more mudslides here in Southern California. And speaking of rain, rain washed out the Daytona today. They expect to hopefully get it done tomorrow, although we got to get all this rain out. It'll slowly clear out as we head into the morning hours on Monday, which is President's Day. Jerika?
Paul Goodlow, thank you. Well, gridlock in Congress is not new, but here's something that is. Some of our youngest female lawmakers are trying to make a change by making it easier for new mothers to serve. CBS's Scott McFarland has more.
In her first term, Florida Republican Anna Paulina Luna is learning the Capitol complex's maze of corridors. So's her newborn son, who's getting quite a good look from his stroller at the marble ceilings. Luna and California Democrat Sarah Jacobs, both of whom were born in 1989, are seeking change in a building which clings to history.
I think that this is going to open the discussion.
Authoring new legislation requiring the House allow its members who give birth the right to vote by proxy from home for the first 6 weeks.
You've said you're only the 12th woman to ever give birth while serving in the U.S. House, and you can't vote when you're home with the baby. Is that because men wrote the rules?
Well, I think that when the Constitution was written, I don't know if they anticipated women would be in office.
It's very obvious that this institution was designed by and for old white men.
Luna suffered complications before and after her delivery in August. Had to shuttle back and forth to Washington for key votes amid a government shutdown crisis. Jacobs put motherhood on hold, worried how she'd make it work between D.C. and her home in San Diego.
So I decided to freeze my eggs, and that required months of hormone pills, of shots, of a procedure under anesthesia.
Doctors are unequivocal and emphatic.
You learn
the first 6 weeks with baby are critical.
You're going through a recovery process. There's some pain involved. But meanwhile, you're in charge of feeding this baby, and this baby depends on you.
And building a routine.
The hardest part probably is learning to build a new routine.
In Congress, change comes slow. So far, fewer than 36 colleagues have joined the effort, none of them in leadership, after pushback about a proxy voting system that was misused by some during COVID.
We're not, trying to go party in Cabo San Lucas here. We're trying to actually take care of, a newborn.
Luna has transformed part of her office into a nursery, and the baby is a new fixture in these old halls. Scott McFarland, CBS News, the Capitol.
Yeah, and taking care of a baby is no vacation. Well, straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, whether at a parade or a game, these are places that are not immune to mass shootings. CBS's Mark Strassman on America's gun violence problem. And later, the five-star dining experience feeding families and dreams. Today's shooting deaths of 2 police officers and a paramedic in suburban Minneapolis add to a grim toll. So far in 2024, there have been more mass shootings in this country than we've had days of the year. Our Mark Strassman explores the impact.
Gunshots, panic on parade in Kansas City. A Super Bowl celebration hijacked. Another American moment shattered.
I was just crying a lot.
Yeah.
You had to have been terrified.
Yeah, I was terrified. I was traumatized.
With today's gun violence, there is no sacred space. Inside this Houston megachurch last Sunday, a woman stormed in firing an AR-15. She was shot and killed by off-duty police officers after a running gun battle.
It's scary. It is. It's scary.
On average, more than 325 Americans are shot every day. Last year saw 656 mass shootings, defined as 4 or more victims.
I've traveled the world and felt a lot safer there than I did in my own city.
We're twitchy. Bullet by bullet, gun violence grafts onto everyday stresses.
People are experiencing vicarious trauma.
Dr. Arthur Evans, CEO of the American Psychological Association.
How significant is this stress?
We have about a third of people in the country who are saying that their behavior has changed because of mass shootings.
Right after mass shootings, Evans says 75% of Americans report significant stress, and that parents of young children especially have concerns about their kids' safety.
When you're talking about churches and synagogues and shopping malls, we have less of an ability to distance, and I think that has a different kind of impact on us.
On the polarizing issue of guns, a majority, 56%, favor more restrictions, according to Gallup.
I'm a gun owner. It should be, harder for certain individuals to obtain a gun.
Owning guns makes millions of Americans feel more in control. But with gun violence, anxiety climbs because people feel they've lost control.
Why haven't I got shot? I don't know.
Guns in crowds have become a new American anxiety. Kansas City, a reminder of Denver's NBA championship parade last year when 2 people were shot.
People just can't go buy a gun or an assault rifle and go kill people. I mean, how many more people have to die before we change that?
Mark Strassman, CBS News, Houston.
Well, still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, an old hit is making a new drive, but Billboard's Top 100. A hit song written and performed by Tracy Chapman is once again on the Billboard Top 100 for the first time since 1988. This performance at the Grammys with Chapman and country sensation Luke Combs apparently sparked the original song's revival. Now, his cover of Fast Car last year brought in a new generation of fans. And it made Chapman the first black woman to be the sole writer of a song to top the country charts. The original track, released 36 years ago, is now number 42 on Billboard's Hot 100. Since the Grammys, radio play of Chapman's song has gone up 70%, and it's been streamed at least 6 million times. That's a lot. Well, next on the CBS Weekend News, the California organization serving up second chances and carving culinary careers. We end tonight with Farming Hope. In tonight's Weekend Journal, CBS Bay Area's Itai Had reports that's the name of a San Francisco nonprofit refining the culinary arts by uplifting the disadvantaged.
Growing up, Devin Jordan had a lot on his plate. But these days, he's able to deal with whatever life dishes out.
This is probably the furthest thing from what I envisioned my life to be.
After being in and out of prison for various offenses for a total of 16 years, Devin suddenly found himself on the outside with little to no prospects.
Nobody was willing to give me a shot because of my past.
But then he stumbled on a place called Farming Hope and went from serving time to serving meals.
They gave me a shot here. They accepted me into the culinary arts apprenticeship. And that's kind of what reignited my passion.
Today, he's a chef in charge of catering a 3-course menu that could easily rival some of the Bay Area's most popular hotspots.
We have a 3-cheese mac and cheese topped with the garlic panko breadcrumbs. For the second course, we have a garlic crusted roast beef with a vegetable gravy and roasted vegetables. And then to end it, we got an olive oil cake with homemade whipped cream topped with fresh pomegranate.
But even though it may look like a restaurant, it's not. Farming Hope is a nonprofit training program that helps people who've either been incarcerated, homeless, or are survivors of violent crimes. Carrie Rogers is the co-executive director.
When you're overcoming obstacles in your life and trying to move on to your next chapter and re-enter the workforce, you may be the last person called back for a job interview or never called back.
The meals here are free. Every single customer is food insecure. The only payment accepted in this place is a thank you.
Do you love it?
Rebecca Nichols came here with her great-grandson. She says living on a fixed income leaves little money for eating out.
Oh my gosh, it's an elegant dinner with tablecloths.
For Devin, it's a dream come true.
I get to do what I love for a passion, but I'm also helping people. You know what I'm saying?
It's a reminder that sometimes all it takes to change a life is a helping hand and a delicious meal served with a side of redemption. Itai Had, CBS News, San Francisco.
That mac and cheese look good. Well, that is the CBS Weekend News for this Sunday. Coming up tonight on 60 Minutes, Norah O'Donnell takes you to the crisis in the Red Sea. From all of us here, I'm Jerika Duncan in New York. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night.